Well, good evening, everybody. It's Joe Chaffee on this Sunday night. We're at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and we are going to be watching Tropical Storm Michael, which was upgraded this morning, and it has strengthened as it has gotten better organized as the day wore on. A few things have happened today that are impacting how the models are handling Michael. By the way, before we get going, I just want to correct something because I guess maybe my vacation kind of emptied my mind too much. We've had 6 hurricanes this year, and we are up to the M storm, which is the 13th named storm. This is an above average year. It's just that Florence really has been the only major. The other ones have been relatively minimal. Chris got up there a little bit early on in July, but I was mistakenly given the wrong number. The hurricanes outside of Florence, as I said, have been minimal. And Isaac and Beryl were very, very small systems. Beryl was basically a severe thunderstorm with a name on it. But nonetheless, Michael is front and center. So why don't we get going here? Welcome to everybody that's on the board tonight. Delvin, I haven't seen you in a while. Good to see you here today. And Michael Uber, let's not even talk about the Giants with the 63-yard field goal, okay? Not going there. And Richardson, good to see you. I know you weren't feeling too well. Hopefully you're feeling better. And yes, Mike Picarello, you're going to get that colder weather coming. Michael is going to help energize the whole change in the pattern that's going on for later this week. But front and center tonight is going to be uh, our new tropical storm. And let's take a look at the satellite loop from this evening, because that really has been uh, showing Michael getting better organized. But there's been a bit of a shift during the day today as you watch the loop uh, develop. It starts with the center away from the main convection, but during the day, we've seen a large burst. See where all that green just starts bubbling up? A new center formed east of the original center, and it has completely taken over. And this was verified by the reconnaissance aircraft earlier today, earlier this evening when it went through there this afternoon. And the new center shifting to the east kind of adjusts the forecast a bit going into the next several days. And it's going to probably impact where the landfall is going to wind up being in the northeastern Gulf of Mexico. I'm kind of zeroing in on the Florida Panhandle at this point as where this thing is going to come ashore. Most of the models are in that general vicinity, and certainly this eastward redevelopment of the center would argue for that shift slightly to the east. I want to show you the reconnaissance aircraft because the reformation of the center actually was taking place as the reconnaissance aircraft was in there during this afternoon. And this is the plot. You see that little plane icon that's at the top of the picture is when the reconnaissance aircraft was going outbound. When it came inbound, it's beneath that where you start to see the wind barbs show up. And then it moved in first center pass at 1,003 millibars. Then it flew out in the yellow, was where we see the winds running up. I'll bring it up a little higher so you can see the scale. So the yellow wind barbs 45 to 50 knots. Now, it comes around and it goes through a second pass, starts to run into 55 to 60 knot winds. And then suddenly you see that the center basically jumps by a fairly large distance there. Uh, it, uh, it jumps from roughly 86.3 west to about 85.5 west. So about 8/10 of a degree. That's a good 50-mile jump there. And the pressure dropped to 999 millibars. And then on the next pass, the center is northeast of that position down to 996. So you had a 7 millibar drop here. And then on that third pass, you'll notice that there's a large belt of 45 to 50 knot winds with some embedded 50 to 55 and 55 to 60 knot winds. So that shift eastward from, say, about 86.3 to now on the final pass at about 85.4, so almost a full degree to the east. So that, I think, is going to make a difference going forward as far as where the landfall is going to be with all of this. Now, with respect to how strong is this going to be when it makes landfall, we have the 18Z intensity guidance. I'm going to just really quick see if the 0Z, and it is. Okay, so now the new 0Z intensity guidance has come in, and we've seen a continued increase in the strength that the models are forecasting. We have now a vast majority, just about all of the models bring this at least to a category 1, and we have a fair number of models bringing it to category 2, and 2 of them actually bring it up to category 3 status. I think what's happening is that we're seeing the landfall getting pushed back a little bit. This is buying the system a few extra hours on over very warm water, up to about 30 degrees Celsius. I still think that there's a lot of, the upper air winds are rather strong. The shear is still there. And I think there's going to be a good amount of shear for at least a while, but it will be relaxing as we go forward. Maybe the upper end of these strengths are pushing it. I don't want to completely rule it out. Now that we've gotten this eastward shift, it would seem to me that there is a possibility that we certainly will get to category 1. I think there's a fair chance that we could even go to a category 2 on this. The global models, the European in particular, joined the GFS with rather low pressures, and the European is the slowest of all the models. It doesn't even have a landfall happening until sometime Thursday morning, so it keeps it over the water for an extra 18 to 24 hours. That's a significant amount of time uh, for this storm to be sitting over 30 degrees Celsius water, and that could certainly allow it to push the upper end of the strength forecast that we're seeing here, showing up on the intensity models. Now, we've got the model forecast tracks. Let's see if the new ones are out, and they are. So the vast majority, they're all clustered. They continue to shift eastward. In fact, now they're shifting down the panhandle into northeastern Florida, not quite as far south as Tampa Bay, but certainly Panama City, Apalachicola, back westward toward Pensacola. That the westernmost track is still right on the border of Alabama and uh, and and Florida, right on the Panhandle. And I'm going to bring this up full screen now, so you don't need to see me, and we can just look at the maps. The track from there after landfall, and this is going to be a challenging forecast ahead because of the fact that we do have all the models taking this well to the east of the Appalachians, and some of them taking it right along the Carolina coast. I think this has a number of implications. The one that I want to sort of put front and center because of the rains from Florence, that rain is going to be a big deal for uh, areas in southern Georgia, South Carolina, and into North Carolina. The good thing about all this is that we're not talking about any kind of stalling system. It's going to be moving along at a fairly good clip and probably accelerating later in the forecast period off the Virginia, North Carolina coast, passing off the New Jersey coast and south of Cape Cod. Now, what happens here at this point? Well, for one thing, the winds across, say, from north and west of the storm track are going to wind up being from the north or northeast, at least for a while, until the low gets further out, and then they'll turn northerly and then northwesterly. That's a good thing. because that at least will keep coastal flooding down. We have a new moon tomorrow, so peak tides will probably come Tuesday night and Wednesday. So we'll be coming off those very peak high tides in the middle part of the week. But at least we're not dealing with any kind of prolonged east or southeast winds because the track is going to be moving southwest to northeast and not moving north to south. The areas along the southeast coast, that I think is going to be a bit of a different story in that with the storm going in over the Florida Panhandle, there is going to be a bit of a fetch coming in from off the Atlantic. So this could be problematic for tides for the Carolinas and into coastal Georgia and even into northern Florida. So we're going to want to probably pay some attention with regards to this. And over the track where the heavy rains fall, we are talking about perhaps some areas getting 3 to 5, 3 to 6 inch rainfalls. This is what the European is generating. And tropical systems can oftentimes be underdone by the global model, so we could see amounts being a bit higher. But it's going to be fast, so at least we're not talking about something that's going to be sitting around for many, many days. The the GFS ensembles, and here is this is the model that probably has the track that's furthest to the west. And the GFS also has been shifting eastward. I think it's just kind of lagging a bit. You'll probably see it shift a bit further east on the next run, but the afternoon runs did shift a bit to the east. The operational run, which we'll get to in a second, is well to the east of this envelope of all the members of the GFS ensembles. Let me right now just say a couple of things with respect to these maps. The tropicaltidbits.com. Thank you very much for letting us use it. Also, you're watching at home. You know the drill by now. You don't use these maps for any kind of decision making. You want to go to your local National Weather Service office at weather.gov or the National Hurricane Center. Their website is nhc.noaa.gov, and there's a link on the descriptor to this live stream and on the descriptor to this video if you're watching it on a replay. So please bear that in mind. Don't use these maps or any maps that we show you with regards to decision making. The only map that is the official map, is the official forecast, is the one I'm just putting up right now, which is the Hurricane Center's forecast. A track running north-northwest, becoming a hurricane sometime Monday night, and then moving north and then northeastward, 1 p.m. Wednesday, approaching the Florida Panhandle, and then inland, 1 p.m. Thursday, somewhere just northwest of Charleston as a tropical storm, and maintaining some identity as a tropical storm for a while, probably becoming post-tropical at the point that it is east of 70 degrees west at about 38 and about 68. The European, by the way, has a rather stormier proposition for parts of the coastal areas of southern New England and down through central and South Jersey southward, because of the track on the European is actually north and west of this position. So the global models are north and west of the hurricane tracking models is pretty much the bottom line. There are no tropical storm warnings up yet for any of the U.S. coast, any part of the U.S. coastline. We don't have any hurricane watches up yet, although I suspect that we'll probably see some kind of watches go up on Monday for the Florida Panhandle, maybe going back a little bit west toward Mobile. I'm just openly speculating here. And with a track just inland of the coast, you have to allow for the possibility that this system is going to hold on to tropical storm force winds pretty much all the way up if it moves just inland of the North Carolina coast. So you may eventually see tropical storm watches go up for, say, coastal Georgia, South and North Carolina a little bit. Maybe not it won't happen tomorrow, but perhaps on Tuesday, when it becomes clearer where the landfall is going to be, then we're going to start seeing some watches going up for areas to the north and along the southeast coast of the U.S. Again, anytime you have a setup like this, it's always going to be a little bit tricky. granted, all of these storms are tricky and forecast challenges. This is going to be a bit of an extra challenge because of the fact that it's going to extend impacts up the East Coast, maybe as far north as southern New England when we get to about later Thursday night. I'm just, you know, the most important thing is the fact that this is going to be moving along at a fair clip. I'm going to bring up the uh, uh, paint box because I want to go over a few things of what's going on with respect to the upper air, because this is really, you know, going to be front and center now in terms of the keys to all of this and where this is going. I've got the eastern U.S. view. You can't really see Michael in this picture yet, except very, if you go down near the bottom center, you start to see that little blue shading. So that really is the reflection of Michael. Let me just get rid of the paint box here. It'll just give me a second. I'm sorry, let me bring the paint box up. Hang on a second. All right, so we'll do a little drawing tonight. I just want to, okay, great. So here's our upper air, and I'll shrink it down so we can get a full view of the map, or a bit better view of the map. You can't really see Michael on this view yet. Make it a little bit smaller. You start to see, I want you to be able to at least see the date on the top and the full southern extent of the pictures that we're going to be looking at. So what's happening with the upper air? You've got this big upper high sitting off the East Coast. The big East Coast ridge will peak in intensity on Tuesday. Just off the screen on the far left is a deep trough that's out in the Rockies. You begin to have a strong southerly flow ahead of that trough. We're getting, you know, winds coming around the upper high, and then you've got Michael, which is down here, just beginning to make its appearance. So this is how the upper air appears. And if you were to hold everything in place, if there were going to be no changes in this upper high or the position of that trough, you would more than likely see the track probably go toward New Orleans, right there, right in between the trough and the ridge, just squeeze right in the middle. But we know that in this particular situation, that is not going to be the case. We are going to be seeing the upper air changing, and we're going to jump now to Friday. And this is where, actually, I want to jump before that. So let's go to Thursday. So here's what the upper air looks like on Thursday morning. Again, we're looking at the European model here. The biggest difference between the European and the GFS is the fact that Michael is further along on the GFS. At this point, it's inland over central Georgia someplace. The European is about 12 hours slower. This, again, wouldn't have landfall until Thursday morning, which, if that were the case, you probably would be talking about a strong Category 2 hurricane coming ashore. But look at the upper high now in the east. It's weakened. The actual high has dropped southward to off the Florida coast. And the other big change, which is, I think, even more important, is the trough in the west. It broadens out. You've got a bit of a shortwave trough that's running across the Great Lakes, but you pretty much have a southwest flow going on just to the north of Michael. So with the ridge weakening and the upper air winds gradually sinking southward from that upper trough, you're going to wind up with Michael going toward the Florida Panhandle and then trying to ride around the periphery of that upper high. And again, the fact that these upper air features are changing is going to impact the track going forward. If we jump now one more time frame, and let's go now to Friday in terms of the jet stream. Now here's where it starts to get interesting. Again, the issue with the European is that it is the slowest of all the models. The GFS has this further along, but it does have the same idea. Obviously, the timing is going to be very, very important with this, but here is, you have another shortwave trough that comes into the picture moving down into the northern plains. The flow uh, is continuing to be southwesterly up, up the east coast. The ridge is gone. So Michael now is moving along to the northeast, and the European kind of tracks it this way, right along or just inland of the North Carolina coast, and then passes it just south and east of Nantucket. Takes it almost to about 39 and a half degrees north and about 70 and a half, 71 degrees west. That's pretty far left with respect to its track. The the system and the changes that are going on in the upper air in North America gradually it winds up taking us to this upper air setup for this weekend. This is a rather chilly pattern that is setting up. And I think we're at the point now, because we're only talking 5 days away here. I find it very difficult to believe that the models, all of them have some variation of this look, that they're going to be we're suddenly going to find ourselves looking at a ridge in the east. It's just not going to happen. We have a very deep trough by Saturday down along the east coast, but notice there's yet another short wave that's rotating around it. You've got a low. Remember, we were talking a couple of days ago, the upper low that was in the Bering Sea along the international date line. You had a ridge in the Gulf of Alaska. Well, now that ridge is pushing toward the west coast of northwestern Canada, and that's an important change here, because that allows for the troughing to drop down into the eastern part of the United States. So the bottom line is that our air is going to be coming in from northwestern Canada, dropping down into the northern plains, and with these troughs, it's going to come down in pieces. We're going to have some cooler air coming in behind Michael as it goes by, and then that second short wave is going to swing around later in the weekend, early next week, bringing another cold front through, and behind that will probably be the coolest of this round of cool air that's coming in. So the pattern change is there. The pattern change is definitely going to be happening, and we are going to get some, we'll call it real autumn weather, coming in just in time for the middle part of the month. And it also, by the way, looks to me, when I looked at the long range, it looks like the trough may want to hang around in the east for a little while. So that is an interesting development as well with respect to the long term. So let's jump to the GFS and take a look at that upper air. I'm going to start it back from last Thursday. And here we have it here. So there you have it on the GFS. You see the trough in the west. This was last Thursday, ridge across the Gulf states. This sets up the lower than normal pressures across the Caribbean. You wind up getting this tropical storm that develops. We're now into tonight. Strong ridge along the east coast, deep trough in the western part of the United States. Ridge in the east peaks in intensity on Tuesday. And at this point, it begins to weaken and break down somewhat. You get the trough in the west beginning to shift eastward. The ridge by the end of the week is gone. The heights fall. You get the first short wave that comes through on Saturday. And then here comes the second one that comes through along about Monday. And now we're into the week of the 15th. And this is where we're going to get a really strong shot of cool air coming down into the eastern part of the United States. This cool push of air, let's call it cold in some places, cool in others, will probably make it all the way down into the Gulf states and into Texas and Florida. So this pretty much puts an end to this latest string of very warm and humid conditions that we have been dealing with, some areas more than others. And beyond the 10-day period, if you want to believe it, the trough comes back into the east late in the forecast period, and you've got a rather strong ridge that builds up in the west. So as long as these things, as long as we've gotten rid of the ridge, as long as it doesn't make a surprise comeback, I think we may be done with that for a while, and it looks like that we're going to be dealing with the trough coming into the eastern part of the United States. So let's bring up the daily weather maps and take a look at what this all means. We'll look at the GFSs. We did, and I'll show you the Europeans, the difference with the European. So we'll start with tonight, and here comes, you see Michael there, ridge off the east coast, so rather warm and humid conditions continue, through Wednesday. There's your landfall. It looks like as it's moving northward, it looks like it's heading for the Alabama Gulf Coast, and then kind of jumps a little bit to the east there. The GFS again is the furthest west of the models. It's not that far west of the other models, but it's sort of on the western edge of the guidance envelope. And by Thursday, you've got rains. Now, the heaviest rains here, because of the lowest further inland, are showing up in western South Carolina, and actually want to go back to get into some heavy rains also into Alabama and a good chunk of the state of Georgia, and into western South Carolina, western North Carolina, the low center, now into eastern Virginia by Thursday night. Passes off the Delaware coast as a fairly wrapped up low. This would probably produce some decent winds here. When I say decent, I'm talking about gales. I don't mean that they're good winds. Okay, I just want to be clear. And then it moves out to the northeast. By the way, take a look in the southwest, because Sergio at this point is coming in into the Baja Peninsula and bringing more heavy rains to Arizona and New Mexico. So whatever dry conditions that were out there, Rosa took care of some of that. Sergio is going to finish the job as it moves in at the end of the week. And then, of course, you see that first shot of cool air behind Michael comes in. And then we've got the second front with that second short wave. This is the really cool push. You can see the thickness lines there that measure how cold the air is over the Great Lakes. You start to see the blue. That tells you that maybe there could be some snow potential, some snow shower potential across parts of the Great Lakes and even into maybe upstate New York, some rain and snow showers. And this high, by the way, notice that it does drop pretty far to the south. It gets down into Arkansas, and you have a strong gradient that develops across the Gulf of Mexico early next week. We'll have to watch the Southwest Gulf for potential for something coming out of there in this sort of situation. Models are trying, the GFS is trying to show some kind of a low there. Whether it's a tropical low or not remains to be seen. And now, of course, we're getting into the squirrely period of the long range, which is, not going to be very reliable as far as the rain amounts. I'm sorry, as far as what the actual weather is going to be this far out. Rainfall. What are we going to do with respect to rainfall here? Well, the rain from Michael, pretty bullish on the GFS. You can see the stripe of 2 to 4 inch rains, and of course you've got 4 to 6 inch rains on the Florida Panhandle back through Alabama. If you wind up with a track like the European, where the system rides along just inland of the South Carolina, North Carolina coast, you can take these heavy rain bands of 2, 4, 5 inches or more and shift them further to the east so that the rain amounts, say in West Virginia and in Western Virginia and in West Virginia, would be more on the order of 1 to 2, 1 to 3, and then you get to the 3 to 6 inch plus rains, or more toward coastal South and North Carolina and coastal Georgia, and then running up to Delaware and maybe into southern New Jersey, and then the amounts start to tail off as you move on north and west of there. The European, as I do want to show you the European's track, it does have a different, it's further east, and it's also slower. But the European has a fairly deep system. It would argue that it reaches hurricane strength Monday night, Tuesday morning, much like what the Hurricane Center is forecasting. You can see it here. Bring it down so you can see the date there and the time. And then up we go. Now this is Wednesday, and then this is Thursday morning. 950 millibar pressure on the European. European hasn't been going too crazy with some of these storms as far as pressure is concerned. So, when I saw that 950, it kind of, it certainly opened my eyes up. But you can see how it gets that low, if only because of the fact that it takes almost an extra 18 to 24 hours for it to move inland. a comparison to the GFS, for example, the GFS at this point has the low in northeastern Georgia, okay, for the same time frame. So that's a pretty big mileage distance that we're talking about between the GFS and the European. But the Europeans track, and as it loads, so here we go again with the European. We're at Thursday morning, 8 a.m. Friday morning, 8 a.m. So the European has this more of an event for late Thursday night into Friday, and then by Saturday morning, it's got a wrapped up 967 low sitting at just south of 40 north and just to the east of 71 west. Almost looks like in the wintertime, it looks like a snowstorm with a snowstorm track without the cold air. I would think, by the way, that at this point, with the upper air that the European indicates, that we're probably talking about something that isn't quite tropical anymore. It's going to be a strong extratropical, or in the process of transitioning over into a strong extratropical storm, and it's getting impacted by these short waves that are in the northern stream here that are moving across the Great Lakes. You can pick them out by the indentations in the line. There's a short wave there in western New York and western Pennsylvania. Looks like another one into the western lakes. It's kind of a fractured look, but it would seem to me that the European is energizing this system by respecting the energy of those upper air short waves that are coming around in the jet stream that is dropping down out of Canada. This all, of course, remains to be seen. We're talking about stuff for late next week, and given the variables, all of this is really highly speculative at this point. And I want to emphasize that we're not yet in any kind of position to make a specific forecast with regards to the impacts uh, north of, say, North Carolina, Southern Virginia. Maybe we should have a better handle on this tomorrow, but we can see the possibilities here. It would seem to me that we're going to see something up. We're going to see weather coming up the East Coast, at least up into Southern New England. I think the colder weather pattern is all part of this equation, and that is definitely going to happen. But a lot of variables still remain, and we'll be trying to work it all out in the next couple of days. Just want to show you tonight with respect to any severe weather going on. And of course, if the radar here that's overlaid from the Storm Prediction Center's risk map, it's 9:03 Eastern time. So if you're watching this on a replay, please check your local National Weather Service office at weather.gov for the latest radars and for any severe weather watches or warnings that may be up in the slight risk area in western Texas and eastern New Mexico. We do have a severe thunderstorm watch box up this evening there. The marginal risk extends up in through central Missouri on up into central Illinois, and there are some strong to potentially severe thunderstorms going on the radar this evening in that particular region, and also in parts of western Oklahoma moving into southern Kansas. So pretty interesting pattern going forward for sure. We're going to be tearing our hair out. Got my hair cut earlier a week ago. Hasn't grown back enough for me to tear it out, but it is going to be a struggle with respect to the forecast. So back to the chat board tonight, and it's always good to see everybody here. Thanks everyone for being here. I'm going to take some of your questions in a moment. Let me just take this opportunity to introduce everybody well, most of you have known it because I've been doing it on all the live videos, but I do have a platform on Patreon. It's a subscription platform that is all weather all the time, including exclusive posts and videos just for Patreon members. So if you're interested, I just put the link up there. It's $2 a month, and we appreciate and thank those of you who have joined. The number of you have and have indicated that you like it. So thank you very much for doing that. I really appreciate it. Also, one other way you can support my channel is if you shop on Amazon. There's an Amazon link on the descriptor to this video. If you shop on Amazon, do your searches and shopping by accessing it through this link. Amazon, you get your stuff. Amazon throws me back a little bit of coin out of their pocket, and it gets me a couple of extra cups of coffee during the week. So thank you very much for those of you who have used that, and I put the link up on the board. So let's talk for a little while. I'm going to run back to the beginning. We've got a nice crowd tonight. Thanks everybody for being here, by the way. Uh, those of you who have stuck to, from the beginning, and the late comers. Tyler Nepp, you will get your cooler air, I promise. I really think that we are going to see the big, a big change here, regardless of what Michael does. It is going to help push along this change in the upper air pattern. John Curry telling us the 18Z Euro has a landfall near Panama City during early Thursday morning. So perhaps the 6Z has sped this up a little bit, takes the pressure down to 954. I mean, that would be a strong Category 2 hurricane at landfall if it verifies. And I don't think it's inconsistent given what what we're looking at tonight. I kind of, I guess looking at the European, my own feeling is that I think it's a little bit too slow. All the other models seem to be consistent with the idea of speed. The European is standing alone from with its slower movement. So I'm going to tend to think that the European may will start to nudge itself a little bit further north. Washington, D.C., Mike Wheeler was very good. And it was a great trip. Not only went there, but to Richmond, to Appomattox, Gettysburg, which I've been raving about. If you've never been in Pennsylvania, go to Gettysburg. You have to go at least once if you're a history buff. It was amazing. Juries. Any chance of Michael changing paths to Texas? Zero. Not happening. This is a northeast Gulf landfall. If the ridge were not even if the ridge weren't to break down, you've got that trough in the west that's going to be close enough to you that you're going to get. It's going to keep the storm from getting anywhere close. So the answer is a definite no with regards to Texas. Hello from Pensacola, Florida, Jay Bauer. Nice to see you here. Keep close watch on this because definitely the Florida Panhandle looks like is going to be front and center with all of this. J.S. Sweetie, nice to see you on board tonight. Is it going to hit Conway, South Carolina? You're probably going to get some rain out of this, Yo Boyle J Rock, along about Wednesday night, Thursday. So pay attention. I know you're still all flooded out over there in the Carolinas. So it is going to be problematic with more rain. Again, it is going to be moving, so that at least is a plus. It's going to limit the amount of time to about a 8-hour, 10-hour period of rain. Granted, you could certainly see a lot of rain in that 8 to 10-hour time frame, but at least it's not going to be sitting over you for 3 or 4 days and give you the impact that Florence gave you. But on the other hand, your flood threshold is probably very low at this point, and it wouldn't take much to cause some big problems for you. John Patsko from Pennsylvania. Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate the kind words. Should we be watching the east coast of Florida? Asks Bryce T. I would say if we sometimes when you get landfalling hurricanes in the Florida Panhandle, if their circulations are big enough, you certainly could wind up with rain bands over into eastern Florida. So I think you have to allow for that possibility. And in northeastern Florida, it may be a bit more problematic with those rain bands because you're going to be that much closer to wherever this winds up making landfall. So, the further south you are in the state, the less impact you're going to get. But I think there's going to be some rain issues with much of the northeastern part of Florida, certainly, and very definitely the northwestern part of the state. let's see. Wouldn't be surprised if it's a low end Cat 3 ruin nation. Look, I'm not going to, I was skeptical about this yesterday. Going back and looking at everything and looking at what I'm seeing today, uh, that may be pushing it, but it could certainly get to every bit of a Cat 2. I'm going to be interested to see how that, when it gets into that 30 degrees Celsius water, the outflow with this is going to be pretty good. So that might compensate a bit for some of the wind shear that it's going to have to deal with. But certainly should get to a strong 1, maybe a low grade 2. If everything comes together in terms of the dynamics, you could probably push the upper end of that strength envelope. Um, yeah, the Cat 1 to me looks like that's definitely going to happen. It's been 13 years since a major hurricane hit in the panhandle of Florida. Jay Bauer informs us where you live. Where in the panhandle are you? Not good for South and North Carolina, certainly from the respective rain, but again, it is going to be moving along. Michael M., you're buffering on and off. I'm not showing any problems here on my end tonight, so it might be on your end. I'm doing okay. I'm showing a good stream health and no buffering on this side. So there might be some problems going on elsewhere. Um, Running down, isn't Michael a tropical storm? 60 miles an hour. Yes, I'm sorry. If I still said 50, it is now up to 60 miles an hour on the last advisory. That is correct. I stand corrected if I said 50. Any worries in central Georgia? Monet Hébert. Watch what happens after landfall because you are going to get some rain out of this, it would seem to me. Um, let's see. John um, Bartosiak. After North and South Carolina got recently by Florence with heavy rain, and now there's certainly another round of heavy rains is not what you need. No doubt about it. This is not coming at a good time. One storm a season is more than enough, let alone having to deal with two. But again, this is different because it's coming in from your west, so it's going to impact you differently than Florence did, and the upper air setup is different as well. So please bear that in mind. The two storms are different, and what might have caused problems with Florence may not necessarily come out the same way with Michael. We're just going to have to wait to see once we get a handle on where it goes inland. Once we work out the track up the East Coast, then we could really sort of zero in and figure out just what the rain impacts are going to be for the Carolinas. Tony Camacho, does anyone think Jacksonville, Florida will see anything? Again, Tony, sometimes with storms that go into the Florida Panhandle, you do get into the bands of rain on the eastern side. There seems to be more rain-wise on the east side of this at the moment. That's going to probably change as the storm organizes, but I think you're probably going to wind up with some rain from this, and maybe even a little bit of wind, but I don't think you're going to get the kind of winds that you're going to see if you're talking about a hurricane that's going well to your west. Let's rolling down here on all uh, the posts. Um, Nicole Gilbert. I'm in the south of Georgia. Uh, Depends on track, rain for sure, some wind. You are inland, so I don't think you're going to be looking at winds that would occur at the area where there's landfall. One of the things that we're going to have to pay close attention to is on the track is its proximity to the Atlantic and how much of the circulation is going to remain over water as it progresses northeastward, because that is going to be a very, very important factor, keeping winds higher in terms of perhaps gales coming up along coastal areas. But again, that's all going to depend on whether the low is, if it's like the European where it's just inland of the coast, you're going to have gusty winds up and down the Carolina coast, actually from the Georgia coast all the way up into coastal Virginia and eventually into the Delmarva Peninsula and even further north than that. But if it's further west, that kind of changes the equation a little bit. Do you think Tampa? You feel well, Daniel Seaman. Watch these eastward shifts that are going on, these eastward adjustments. They're going to be important. Tampa does seem to be in a spot where they seem to avoid direct hits over the years. There haven't been that many storms that have hit Tampa directly, but you'll be on the east side, so I would imagine that you'll probably get into some rain bands from this, and perhaps some gusty winds. I'll be curious to see what the Hurricane Center does with respect to watches on Monday. Um, the East Coast weather is getting worse. Well, Shelly, man, with this upper high where it is, um, it doesn't make for nice fall weather here around here. That's for sure. Do Billy Johnson? Do you think you may be tropical storm conditions on Long Island? Can I just like wait till? Let's wait till we get to tomorrow and Tuesday to figure out where the track is going to be. The you look at the European, and it kind of looks like uh, some nor'easter conditions. Uh, but again, it's an offshore track, so you're going to be dealing with winds that are going to be more northeasterly, and then eventually northerly and northwesterly. I really don't want to speculate too much about impacts until I get a good idea up the East Coast, until I get a better idea of where this track is going to be. Um, Carson White, well, always with these things, tornadoes are not out of the question in terms of where the storm makes landfall. Certainly, that's been the case with a number of these storms, and I don't see why this one would be any different. If Leslie can push east, or could slow or impede Michael if it held up. Leslie now is so far out to the east. I don't think there's no. It's the only thing that it's doing is really it's out in the central Atlantic. It's pumping up that ridge off the east coast to some degree. So as it moves further to the east, that ridge loses that extra pump that it's getting from Leslie. So that's going to that's one of the reasons why the ridge is going to get crashed, and it's going to weaken considerably. And yes, Iron Mine 10 will probably be sitting in some cool autumn weather at this time next weekend. So Bobby Livingsworth, it will soon feel like fall, but you got to be patient you have to be patient getting through the work week. We've seen this song and dance before, the models. Each time the trough didn't happen, it was a ridge in the east with the timing inside, and that likely means it will be right. Anthony Orr is correct. Again, we're talking 5 days now. We're in that 5 day time frame. I would be beyond astounded to see the trough not the way the models are depicting it. Johnny Quest, still a possible. Well, where you are in the Blue Ridge Mountains, with the cold shot coming in next week, I suppose it's not impossible. We'll visit that possibility as we get a little closer. Bobby Livingsworth, will we see frost from this? Some areas in the Northeast and up in the Great Lakes, yeah. After the pattern change, would not at all be surprised. And being in Buffalo, Bobby Livingsworth, since you've had some 90-degree days in the last couple of weeks. That'll be quite a radical shift for sure when you think about it. Um, just running down lots of talk on the chat. I always like to see that. That's terrific. Timothy Veltman. Um, well, there's no eye now. I mean, the center is out there. It's the stripe of yellow over the Gulf is narrow. Yeah, but right now we're just talking about a center of circulation. Um, we're not seeing strengthening to the point where we're starting to see an eye develop. Let's see. Scott Briller, yes, the Weather Channel is now interrupting normal non-informative broadcasting to cover Tropical Storm Michael. Uh, Bully for them. Okay. Warning signs for how about Delaware? Again, let's defer for another day or so, but it is going to be moving up the East Coast in some fashion. So track is going to be very, very important. This is fast. Let me emphasize again, this is the further north you get, you're talking about a shorter time frame of impact. So perhaps a 6 to 8 hour impact of rain and some wind depending on track. But you know what? If it's further east and offshore, the impacts are going to be, the further north you go, the less and less you're going to see out of this. So where the track is and how it evolves going up the East Coast, and how does it interact with the upper air? That's the other big question, because that is going to potentially be a player here in terms of intensity. And Scott Burler wants me to remind everybody, those of you in New Jersey, I'll be at the Springfield Library at 7 p.m. on Wednesday, October 17th. And it's open to everybody in Springfield, New Jersey. So if you are in New Jersey, particularly if you're in northern New Jersey or in and around the town of Springfield, head to the library that night. I will be there. We'll have a lot of fun. These talks are usually, they've all gone very well, knock on wood, so far. And before that, by the way, if you're on Long Island, Tuesday, I will be at the Bayport Blue Point Library in Blue Point, New York, which is on the south shore of Long Island, about halfway out near the town of Patchogue. And that's at 7 o'clock. Again, Tuesday, 7 o'clock, the Bayport Blue Point Library. Wind shear, relaxing for Mike. Yes, to some degree it is, but I think there's going to be shear out there. There's going to be, doesn't completely relax. It does relax enough that we're going to, it should be able to strengthen to some degree. Whether it pushes the upper end of the intensity guidance, I don't know. Michael morphing into a major winter storm for eastern Canada. You know what? I didn't look far enough out to see what the GFS did with it, but let me see. And I really have to use that model, if only because of the fact that it doesn't. The other models don't. The European doesn't really give us precip. Well, I mean, they're getting some stuff. Well, no, it doesn't, because if, again, this is going to depend on on track, but at least from the standpoint of the GFS, it will bring rain to Nova Scotia and maybe to Newfoundland, but the low center on the GFS passes pretty far south of Nova Scotia. So my answer to your question is no, in terms of a big impact for Eastern Canada. I'm going to bring the Southeast Canada map up, and I'll show it to you guys, those of you who are watching from Canada. I know there are some of you like Patrick McGill. No, Patrick McGill's in Ireland. I'm sorry, but I know some of you are watching from the Canadian Maritime provinces. So this is important to you. But as far as the GFS is concerned, you've got the low passing south and east of Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. So the main impact staying offshore. And as for snow, you got to get into Labrador. Just want to take a look at the Canadian model at this point, and even the Canadian doesn't really have. The Canadian's track, by the way, is is furthest west of all the models. It does have a low center over Nova Scotia by Friday morning and passing south of Newfoundland and weakening, but it doesn't have, as you put it, morphing into a major storm. Ryan, you got to watch. You got to listen to your sources here, okay? um, your sources keep leading you down these odd paths when it comes to the rumors. So be clear about what you're hearing. I'm not criticizing you, by the way. I'm just just pointing it out. But also, I do want to note that there is a wave that has moved off the African coast that does have a chance to develop here. You see, the European actually does develop a system out in the tropical Atlantic, finally pulling Leslie away to the east-northeast. It still has some identity going forward in the in its longer range period, and actually fires up another low in the Caribbean toward the end of the forecast period. So that'll be that's the Europeans' picture. We'll see if it works or not. But with respect to Michael, and there it is. Wait a minute, hang on. I'm sorry. I'm looking at the Canadian. I'm jumping ahead. The Canadian spins up another low So the Canadian here, and the Hurricane Center does acknowledge that there's a system coming off the African coast here, so this is not a surprise. It does hold it together. But the Canadian, with respect to what it does with Michael, takes it in just more along the lines of the Mississippi Gulf Coast or near Mobile in Alabama, and then it absorbs it into a deep low north of Lake Huron and takes it, well up to the west of the coastline. So that it seems to me that the Canadian is well outside what the other models are showing. Here's the European, by the way, and there's the reflection of the European of the system out in the tropical Atlantic. There is, this is now Saturday morning with Michael in whatever form, east of New Jersey, south of Nantucket. And now the European, I can't see in between, but it does have a wrapped up low north of Newfoundland. So the European perhaps is what they're looking at, that it has a really well developed cyclone that moves from southeast of Cape Cod to close to Nova Scotia over Newfoundland and then northeast from there. But again, we're going to be suspect here in the longer term until we get a bit closer. So you're going to have to give me at least you're going to have to give us at least another couple of days before we can go down that particular road. Okay, just checking on the rest of you on here. Okay. All right, I think we can wrap it up at this point. So let me once again just really quick uh, do a little bit of shameless self promotion here. Uh, I appreciate all of you who have joined up on the Patreon platform to help me support my channel. I just put the link up there again for those of you who are interested. It's $2 a month. You get a lot of weather, no ads, extra exclusive videos for Patreon members, and also tomorrow night on the YouTube live stream. Don't forget at 7 o'clock. We're going to have Dr. Judah Cohen on. We're going to talk about the upcoming winter and what he sees going forward. He likes to look at Siberian snow cover growth in the month of October, and we'll talk about that and maybe talk a little bit about snow cover growth over North America and how it impacts it. So that's Judah Cohen tomorrow. That'll be on the 7 o'clock live stream, and my colleague Joe Rayo will be joining me as well. So do make sure you mark it down. What I may do tomorrow is I will probably, I'm thinking off the top of my head now, I will probably do a Michael live stream separate early, and then and it's going to be shorter than it otherwise would be, or earlier, perhaps at 6 o'clock, and then I'll have to keep it within about a half an hour, and then take a break, and then set up for Judah Cohen at 7 o'clock. So perhaps we'll do it that way. Also, let me just leave you with my Amazon link. If you shop on Amazon, we are a participant in the Amazon Services LLC program, which is an affiliate advertising program designed to provide a means for this channel to earn fees by linking to Amazon.com and its affiliated sites. So if you shop on Amazon, again, they throw me back a little bit of coin for whatever you buy. It doesn't come out of your pocket, it comes out of theirs. And I get a couple of cups of coffee out, and maybe I can buy myself a little bit of lunch once a week. So I appreciate those of you who have done that. And you know what? Every little bit helps. You've got bills to pay. I got bills to pay. And I appreciate those of you. Thank you very much that have used the Amazon link, or if you've joined Patreon. If you're a weather geek, I think you'll really enjoy the Patreon platform, because you also can message me and I will respond to you in a timely manner, which is something that I don't always do with respect to Facebook and Twitter. I'm trying to really kind of focus on the Patreon members. Okay, thanks very much for being here tonight, folks. It was a really good live stream, lengthwise at least, coming up on 60 minutes. Impacts to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Depends on track, Isaiah. Rain, guess, wind, I don't know. It's going to depend on where the track of this is once it moves inland of the Florida Panhandle. Does it go up the coast east of the Appalachians? Yes. Is it inland in South Carolina, North Carolina, in the western parts of those states, or is it going to be closer to the coast? That's the big question. Many model runs to go before we have that figured out. All right, so stay tuned. Going to be a lot more changes here forecast wise going forward in the next couple of days. So you want to stay on top of it. Just keep it right here on my YouTube channel. Good night, everybody.